was forged, the one place it could be destroyed. Cast it into the fire! Destroy it! No.
Sorry, I'm Steelfur. This is Steelfur Speaks. I've been having some microphone problems, so sorry about that. I'm having cable issues, which is the worst kind of issues. This is a fireplace. For those of you who aren't sort of following the joke, so this week we've seen the banned and restricted announcement coming through from LSS. And yeah, it's been pretty spicy. There's been fires lit. Let's just mute that because it's bothering me. We don't need that anymore, sorry. What's going on here? Right, yeah, there's been fires lit. They've revisited the whole design principles of the game, which is really good. And then asked whether or not that's actually been held true. So I think let's just talk about the design principles. Start full. So you start with armor, a full deck, you run down. I think the game is very good because of that. It challenges you to, as it says here, manage your cards correctly. And also that's why a lot of people like the game, because you have a lot of options. You dive straight into the fight with a full set of kit. And then how you choose to spend that defines a good versus a bad player, right? That's why Fab feels so good. Reduced variance. You know, this is just the cards having multiple play states. The game is very successful in that regard. They do have a few more cards that don't block that have increased variance, which I'm less fond of. But in general, you know, every card can be used to either be proactive, defensive. Usually on every turn you have options. Every card's count. Yeah, you see almost every card. They mostly count. That's great. Reward good decisions, not good luck. Fab is not a game where you slam a dragon and ride it to victory. Miragi would disagree, but yeah, in general that's true. So some have been eroded and some are a statement of fact. I think this is interesting. Start full as a statement of fact. That is how Flesh and Blood works. You start with all your equipment, you start with a full deck, you get worn down. Variance has been focused on, but in a way that kind of like rewards agency. It rewards agency when it's like minor variance on stuff like trounce or wages and stuff like that. Their loss of agency is very important in terms of the cards that they banned. We'll get to it, but the main things they're banning are things that draw cards, because when your opponent has 7, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards and you have 4, you quickly lose agency on that turn, right? Because you can block for 12, 16, throw all your armor in and still end up taking 20, 30 damage. You lose agency. Right, so that's agency that you lose. Whereas even a trounce or something like that, you can engage with it, and also you can build your deck in a way that, you know, interacts with clashes and stuff like that in a way that doesn't lose. So, you know, that's good agency versus bad agency, good variance versus bad variance. Every card counts, still very true. I still feel like that's very true. And rewarding good decisions and not good luck. You know, this is interesting. Players create offensive overlap, so the majority of the games with a hero being reduced to 0 life rather than 0 cards. That's true. Offensive overlaps have become too extreme and too frequent. So this is really going back to what I spoke to 2 episodes ago, is about what an aggro deck actually looks like in the game. You know, you need to have a deck that is capable of doing more than, say, the average hand blocks 12, more than 12 damage a turn. And really, you know, because people will push, you need a deck that's capable of putting up 16 damage a turn. You need KO, basically. A deck that's capable of putting about 16 damage a turn. You need a deck that forces your opponent, if you're the aggressive deck, to decide how many cards they're keeping and what their turn looks like. But you always need to be asking that question. And good aggro and Fab is basically always asking the question via damage, how much damage are you willing to take to advance your strategy? And good control is always asking the question, how much damage am I willing to take to advance my strategy? With the idea of keeping your life total high enough that you have value. So they have identified that the most egregious culprit in creating these offensive overlaps where the aggro player has the ability to deal more damage than the opposing player can block. Now, these are necessary for the game, right? You need to create offensive overlaps to win the game as an aggro player. But the most egregious ones are the ones that get you additional cards without requiring additional actions. And it'll be interesting because they haven't banned everything, but it is interesting they have banned some. But, you know, the fact is that the difference. So this part is quite interesting. So they've drawn a line in the sand between something like Red and the Ledger, Warmongers Diplomacy, etc., which obviously take player agency away, but they won't kill you, right? And the difference between losing agency because someone hits you with a control effect that you couldn't block, or you decided not to play defense reactions and you couldn't block it, versus someone presenting 40 damage is a big difference, because you lose extreme loss of agency when you just cannot physically block that much damage. So yeah, this is a really great article. I really recommend reading it if you're interested in where the game goes, right? Because it kind of reinforces, reinforces what people are looking at. There's a little hint to Florian OTK requiring many turns to get OTK. So then they ban Art of War, Bonds of Ancestry, Cash-In, Orihon, Tome of Aetherwind, Tome of Divinity, Tome of Fiendal, Tome of Firebrand, and they ban Bonds of Ancestry and Living Legend. So they restrict it. And there's a lot of analysis as to why, but basically to summarize, people are drawing too many cards. They're drawing too many cards for basically not enough cost. And that's really what needs to be solved, right? And that's happening in these classes. It's causing problems. Cash-In is too free. Art of War is too free. You can cheat the cost of Art of War in both Shadow decks and in Ninjas. Orihon is just too easy to enable with 12 Petal Kasaya, because of the free resources. Tome of Fiendal, too easy to abuse with Eloquence and Dash.io and Wizards. Tome of Aetherwind. And they've left out things that have a natural limitation. They still want cards to be drawn. So stuff like Three of a Kind, which, limits you to playing arrows if you can get them into your arsenal. Tome of the Arknight, that's random. Tome of Harvests, that is, requires an arsenal. I really think the only one that really I question is Tome of Imperial Flame. But Tome of Imperial Flame was only really broken because of Dromide's ability. And with Dromai in Living Legend and Dromai 2, or whatever she looks like when she comes out in the future, potentially not using the pitch in the same way to generate Ash, I think Tome of Imperial Flame being broken in Constructed isn't the case. And when we see our new Draconic heroes, I think they will be built with this in mind, so they will have this not be a great thing. And as it says, if I can recur more Phoenix Flames and discard those instead of actual cards, then it becomes a problem. But if I can't, then I can't. And I think this is really good, right? I mean, I'm not, I would fully recommend reading what LSS says because there's a lot of really interesting analysis. But generally, I would say that this is a really great decision to limit power spikes and bring the game back to this core idea of you have 4 to 5 cards, your opponent has 4 to 5 cards, and you really have to make decisions on how to use them effectively. And that's what a lot of us fell in love with in Flesh and Blood in the first case. So, returning to that is good. And I think this is entirely positive. And I already see a lot of people on Twitter saying, hey, how positive this is. Isn't that great? What are your thoughts about it? Do you agree with me? Is it positive? Are you frustrated? Yeah, but let's move on. Living Legend, this happened. Briar finally went, Dash finally went, and Zen just ran his way across the finish line. Wow. Yeah, I didn't expect Zen to cross the finish line, but, I kind of did. I mean, that much power in that smaller bucket, 20 life. He was just going to run across. And to be honest, I kind of get their point to just let him go. Part of me wishes they'd just gone ahead and nerfed him before he came out. I mean, look, they've either made two choices. They either didn't know how good Zen was, which, as I've kind of said before, raises questions about how good the aggro players on the playtest team are. You know, not saying it should be me, but there are some degenerates who are very good at building aggro decks. Raises some questions about what matchups they were testing into Zen. You know, was it a lot of new, you know, stuff like that instead of testing the heroes that it beats out of the meta, or did they just let those matchups go? Or did they have an idea that they were going to have to ban Art of War? And if they did, and this is where I kind of get frustrated with Living Legend and Fab, like at what point did they know they were going to have to ban Art of War? And if they did know, then at what point does, you know, at what point do they let heroes accrue Living Legend points rather than preemptively banning? Because Zen already has 595 points in Living Legend. And if you knew going into the season that he was going to be this strong, then I think letting him get that many points is irresponsible design, because it brings a hero that people have spent a lot of money on so much closer to Living Legend. Whereas if you thought that there was a way that you could balance him, like, and there's been a discussion on Twitter which I kind of want to reiterate, is my opinion is, if they see a hero that starts racing to the finish line of Living Legend, I would be much happier if they came in with a really heavy-handed ban that took the hero down to like B tier before it starts accruing all of these Living Legend points, right? So come in straight away and just be like, no, we're banning Harmony, we're banning Art of War, and we're banning Bonds. And just get rid of all of them and delete the hero from the game for a little while you sit in the back and you playtest what is a moderate ban. Because I really dislike the fact that a hero comes in super powerful, gets a ton of Living Legend points, and then essentially gets nerfed to the point where they kind of limp across the finish line 6 to 8 months later. I'd much rather if there was a heavy-handed ban followed by a reversion of elements of that ban to bring the hero back in, rather than just letting these heroes accumulate huge amounts of points and then leaving them crawl around. We saw that with Briar. We've seen that with Zen. You know, and I do really think it's a problem. I do really think it's a problem. And I don't like it. I think it creates a negative experience, because now rather than, like, if they banned Zen a bit more heavily, he wouldn't be on 500 points. So now Zen is sitting there at the close enough that you shouldn't be investing in Zen if you're a new player. But he's also just been nerfed, so you don't want to play him anyway. So he just becomes kind of like a mediocre tier hero, which you're not really encouraged to play. Whereas if he didn't have this many points and he was an A tier hero or a B tier hero or a high B tier, then you could say to a new player, look, why don't you go play him? He might get some support later. You might enjoy it. But if he's a B tier hero and he's got this many points, I can't really recommend that a new player picks him up, right? I'll point them towards someone else. So that's kind of it. I'm really kind of frustrated with the Living Legend system at the moment and kind of their approach to balance. I think it would be much better if they did a heavy-handed approach followed by a reversion to stop those heroes racing towards Living Legend, rather than the system that we currently have. That being said, Living Legend format, people are doing great feedback about it. Apparently when everyone is powerful, things feel really good. And that's it. The last thing I want to talk about, a bit of a quick episode this week. I've just finished a work call. It's 8:30 at night. I had a call with America. That's why I'm wearing a shirt. These things have to happen. It's just a brief window into sort of what's been happening on my Twitter, and sort of an interesting discussion that's been happening about a player that has been suspended from a tournament and from the game, but not long enough to actually have an impact on Worlds. So, I mean, this is the list of current banned and suspended players. You can see various people on there for cheating. This guy who was selling fake cards has been banned for 5 years. And we have the latest one, Kaiser Wong. I don't know him personally, so don't take this as a sort of biased opinion. I just like to comment on scandals that happen. And you see he's only been suspended for 2 months, so he will be able to play in Worlds. And that's kind of interesting. So he's been suspended, but he hasn't been suspended for long enough to impact the next large major tournament of the year. And currently we have no other information about what actually happened. And, you know, we've had several high-profile people coming out and saying this person is great. I don't think they deserved what happened. And we've seen the person themselves come out and tweet that they're trying to appeal and they don't think the punishment was fair. Their opponent in the game has come out and said, I don't think the punishment is fair. And I don't want to discount that because, you know, obviously the perception of the people who were actually in the tournament and the opponent and all those kind of things do matter. And you know, you've had other high-profile people defending him, but I do just want to talk about like the big flaw in our suspension and banning process. Like this person, in order to be suspended in Fab, it has to be determined that your actions weren't a mistake, that they were repeated, willful, you know, negative behavior, right? In order to actually get a suspension. And if you've identified repeated negative behavior, then why is it only a 2-month suspension? Why is this person allowed into Worlds? Or if, you know, then it's not that bad, then why are they being suspended, right, at all? Why not just let them off with the DQ they got at the tournament, right? And also, like, why... It's really frustrating. LSS need to start being a lot better at communicating bans and suspensions. People need to understand the sort of person they're sitting down across from. Right, and I'm not saying that in terms of a judgment way, but it's like if someone gets, okay, look, let's take this to the extreme. If someone gets banned for cheating from a year, their ban ends, and then they come and they sit down across from me at a Pro Tour. I should, as a player, have a good understanding of what that person was banned for, so I can watch for that behavior and see if they are regressing or whether they have learned from their mistakes. So, for example, LSS, if they told us, oh, this person was banned for drawing extra cards during their turn consistently during the tournament, I, as a player sitting down across from the Pro Tour, could just watch them and be like, how many cards do they have in hand, and be aware of that. Okay? Without that information, I might sit down across from that person, and I might be like, I have no idea what's going on, and that person could cheat, and I might not notice because they're very good at it. Right? It's that simple. Right? Objectively, players need to know what people have done. And not in a witch hunty way, just in a public information way, in a these are the facts, and that person now has the opportunity to show that they are not that person when they come back from their suspension. And I don't like the idea of letting just the person who did the thing or the person who witnessed them doing the thing comment on what happened. Because, as is notorious in the history of cheating in games, business, even in TCGs, the person who cheats and the people who observe them, aka their friends or their opponents, may not have an unbiased view on, in fact, I'll go as far as to say do not have an unbiased view on what happened. And people who cheat are notoriously often likable, con men, you know, they make friends, they use that friendship as as a cover for their activities. There are lots of people who have cheated in TCGs who a lot of people have come out to defend and said, hey, you know, that person's really nice, I don't believe the things that were said about him, and then it subsequently emerged that they got caught on camera cheating and they were exactly doing what everyone thought they were doing. So, you know, you can't necessarily trust the people on the ground to give you an objective experience. The people we should be trusting to give us an objective conclusion are the judges and are the LSS suspensions review team. And I would really like, if anytime anyone gets suspended or, you know, banned from Fab, there is a paragraph put out just explaining roughly what happened. You know, this person repeatedly manipulated the cards in his deck. This person did X. This person did Y. This person has been suspended for a year because the cheating was quite severe, but we believe that they will take the suspension, and if they come back to the game, they will take that as a punishment and aren't likely to reoffend, right? All of that, just brief, quick explanations of objectively what happened and why the decision was made. I want to know about this person. What had they done that has warranted being suspended from Fab? Because that is quite a big thing for the rules committee to do. But what have they done that wasn't serious enough for them to get suspended from the game in a way that would impact Worlds? What justifies that level of leniency? Because, you know, we've seen a whole range of things happen. You know, people, you know, thinking they've got 4 cards in their deck and drawing 4 cards and leaving a card in their deck, and therefore the card at their deck is not the card that should have been in their deck, and one of the cards in their hand should have been in their deck instead, etc, etc, etc. We've seen all of these things leading to bans and things like that of a year. So if you're telling me it wasn't that serious, but it was serious enough to be suspension worthy, I need to, you know, the community should know what. And also, you know, as a competitive circuit, integrity from the judges' decisions, which is always something I've campaigned for, is also very important. So if there is a big judge decision, like the one that happened at Worlds that we've talked about a bit, that leads to one player getting disqualified, but the other player only getting a game loss, so one player losing £4,000 and the other player not losing his money, when both of them discussed a prize split / bribe, that decision should be scrutinized. And without that overview and the judges communicating clearly what they are doing and what they're thinking, how do we as a community at a distance get a clear view on what is happening, keep ourselves informed, aware, and work to spot potential reoffence where it occurs, which we need to be able to do, right? We need to be able to do it objectively. And also, what does that say about attendance of large events? So if you are sitting down across from someone at a large event who has cheated in the past, I think you have a right to know. And I've had competitive people I've talked about this with that have agreed. And I don't think leaving it up to the players to communicate as much as they want or leaving it up to bystanders is good enough. I think as Fab grows into a mature competitive game, and we already have hundreds of thousands of pounds on the line every year, million dollars on the line every year, as we've moved into that, the accountability, transparency needs to grow as well. So I don't accept that it's okay to let the player decide if he wants to tweet with his spin on what he thinks happened. And you can see responses there which kind of agree. Like, if you're completely innocent or there was some understanding, you're obviously going to say something clearly happened. Players should know. And there has to be other context or people wouldn't get suspended. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. The suspension team doesn't... this is a joke, by the way. I was not hating on Asians. I have talked to this guy. He's trolling me. But, the point is, like, these things happen. We need to be able to talk about them. We need an objective view. And it is true that the opponent came out and said the punishment was too harsh. He didn't deserve to be branded a cheater. But I think I've kind of explained where the personal, like, this is his opponent. I'd be happy to help him with his appeal and any further investigation. I don't think he deserves to be branded as a cheater. Fair enough. I will talk about my DQ after I appeal because I don't want to escalate this to become an internet judgment. That is perfectly fair. This person shouldn't necessarily be talking about what happened. He thinks that he can prove he's innocent and the LSS will bring him justice, but he has been suspended. So, look, all I'm trying to say is this is subjective. What he tells us about what happens, if he tells us anything, is going to be subjective. His opponent's view on him, also subjective, right? And also subjective to the point that his opponent might like him. They might be friends. He might think he's not the sort of person who does that. We need objective views. We need LSS to provide objective views so that we can have faith, that we understand what it means to make it on this list and that people can avoid those mistakes. Or people can monitor for reoffence in the future at events. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't know these people. I assume they're friendly, nice. The people that are defending them are people I trust the opinion of, like Yuki and Tarek, and people who are competitive players with a lot of integrity. I don't distrust their opinion. My argument is I want the views of the players. I also want the views of LSS. I want the views of bystanders who saw factually what happened. I want that more objective view so that people can understand what's actually happened. And I want to understand what is worth a 2-month suspension, but the person is allowed to play in Worlds. Like, what is... Because that's huge, actually. Just to finish off, like, think about and comment if you think this is a big deal or not. But to me, that is huge. Like, the huge thing of saying... You did something so egregious during the tournament that this is crazy. This is fantastic. During the tournament, that is bad enough that you need to be suspended for a length of time. But we're still okay with you playing World Championships this year. That is a very nuanced opinion. And without a view on that, I think there's just going to be confusion. I'm going to stop randomly trolling through Twitter because I've seen something from Elon Musk and about Hitler. I don't know. We're not getting into that. But essentially, like, do you see what I'm getting at? Like, we need to understand that nuance, and also, like, if you know what happened at this event and you think the person is innocent, it behooves you to put out a as unbiased as possible view on what that person did and whether the punishment was viable. So if you were at that tournament and you're a competitive player, it behooves you for the good of the community and also to defend that person by putting out a transparent account of what happened. And genuinely, that is better than all of this speculation that I've seen happening on Twitter, people discussing what happened, and myself and my own investigation. It's better if someone has just put out a clear account of what happened, right? Because that will just dispel everything. Like if someone came out and said, this person didn't de-chi for 2 games during the tournament, and, you know, there was some confusion as to whether or not they did in the 3rd game, so they had to be suspended as a show of force to remind them to do it in the future, because it is a big deal, but we don't think they did it deliberately, and therefore they need a punishment, but it's not that serious, right? I would 100% just be like, okay, cool, I know what happens. Cool, that's a fair punishment, or not a fair punishment. Good for you, right? But if, you know, but without that colour, we're just left speculating. The person got suspended for cheating. According to LSS, this person has cheated. That person is a cheater. You should watch when you're playing against them to see how much and how they cheat, right? That is all we have heard, and that is all I am saying about that at the moment. And that's all we can take away. Unless more light is shed, that person is a cheater, and if you're playing against them at Worlds, you should be careful to make sure that they do every trigger, that their deck is correct, etc., etc. If you don't want that person to be branded as a cheater, then there needs to be more context given as to what they did that isn't cheating. Because LSS, you know, if you look at the list of current banned and suspended players, there are only 5 people or 6 people on that list for... Sorry, there are only 3 people on that list for actually cheating during tournaments. There are 2 people for tournament fraud and 2 for counterfeit material. They do not issue suspensions lightly. So the fact they've chosen to suspend him indicates that something serious happened at the tournament. And until we know what, that will lead to much worse speculation. So if you were there, put out a clear account of it. Or if you don't want to be seen too publicly, you can message me privately, Steelfur on Discord, at Steelfur Speaks on Twitter. And if I view you as a credible source, and if you're one of the players who I think is reasonably competitive, and I know you as a credible source, then I will read your account out or post your account out on Twitter. You can do it anonymously. That's it. Okay, thanks for this episode. I think it was a really interesting episode. Lots of movement in Fab. Let me know if you're excited for Rosetta. I really am. Drop a like and a follow onto the channel. I do still have a Patreon. I am still writing, though I haven't published anything in a while. But I am getting back to it. I will still finish it this year. I've only got 3 months, but I've only got 10 chapters. So I'm going to do it. It's going to happen. Have trust.